The emergency alarm screamed through the halls of Federation. Command Station Alpha 7 making every alien officer jump from their seats. Commander Velter pressed his blue-scaled hand against the communication panel and listened to the crackling. Transmission that came from the edge of known space. The voice on the other end was broken and filled with terror. A Vorthan colonist was speaking in rapid bursts between heavy breathing and what sounded like explosions in the background shadow. Creatures came from deep mines, they said. These things kill without sound, and our weapons do nothing to stop them. Half our people are already dead, and the rest are hiding. Commander Velter had seen many emergency calls in his 40 years of service. But this one made his blood run cold. The Vorthan were known as tough miners who could handle almost any dangerous situation. If something had scared them this badly, it was serious. The transmission cut to static for several seconds before another voice came through, weaker than the first. Please, someone help us. These creatures hunt in the dark, and they seem to know where we hide. Our energy shields mean nothing to them. They walk through walls like smoke, but their claws cut through metal like soft fruit. We have maybe 2,000 people left, and they are coming for us tonight. The communication died completely, leaving the command center in uncomfortable silence. Commander Velter looked at the star map floating above the main table. Kepler 442b was a small dot far from any major shipping lane. The mining colony there produced quantum crystals that powered half the galaxy, but it sat in the neutral zone where no government claimed responsibility. Admiral Zenthos of the crystalline fleet stepped forward, his insect-like features showing concern. Even if we sent our fastest ships, it would take 4 months to reach that system. The creatures will have killed everyone long before we arrive. We need a solution that works in days, not months. The other commanders began arguing about jurisdiction and proper procedures while the clock kept ticking. Commander Velter studied the colony records. The planet had 3,000 Vorthan miners working in underground tunnels that went down for kilometers. The quantum crystals they mined were worth more than most planetary economies, but the remote location made rescue nearly impossible. Federation protocol required a full council vote before any major military action could be authorized. The council members lived on different worlds across the galaxy. Getting them together for an emergency session would take at least 2 weeks. By then, the distress calls would stop coming and another colony would become a ghost town. Commander Velter made a decision that would change everything. He walked to his private office and activated a communication channel that he had hoped never to use. The frequency connected directly to a small blue planet in the outer rim where a relatively new species had recently joined the Federation. The humans had been members for only 50 years, and most alien species still considered them primitive. The Federation had contacted Earth, mainly because humans showed promise in military conflicts. During their short membership, humans had volunteered for the most dangerous missions and always found ways to succeed where others failed. What made humans different was their willingness to fight impossible battles. Most civilized species would retreat when facing unknown enemies and wait for reinforcements. Humans seemed to view impossible odds as a personal challenge. The more dangerous a situation became, the more determined they got. Commander Velter began recording his message to Earth, keeping his words simple and direct. We have a colony under attack by creatures that our weapons cannot harm. 3,000 civilians are trapped on a planet 4 months away from our nearest rescue fleet. These beings kill in darkness and seem immune to energy weapons. We need soldiers who can fight monsters. He paused the recording and thought about what he was really asking. The Federation was requesting help from what many considered a barbaric species. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for their violence and unpredictable behavior in combat. Most alien commanders avoided working with human forces because they could never predict what humans would do next, but that unpredictability might be exactly what this situation required. The shadow creatures had defeated every conventional weapon. The Vorthan colonists possessed standard Federation tactics were clearly useless against enemies that could phase through matter. Perhaps human creativity and willingness to try anything might succeed. Commander Velter finished his message. We need your most dangerous soldiers, the ones who fight when others cannot. Your species has shown abilities that others lack. We are sending all available information about the colony and the Creatures, please respond quickly as time is running short. The message shot through subspace toward Earth, where it would arrive in less than 6 hours. Commander Velter knew he was taking a massive risk if the human response failed the Federation. Council would blame him for the deaths of 3,000 colonists. But if he did nothing, those same colonists would die anyway. While bureaucrats debated proper procedures, Admiral Zenthos approached his desk looking worried. You are gambling with thousands of lives by trusting humans. They are barely civilized and their methods are crude. What makes you think they can succeed where our advanced forces would fail, Commander? Velter looked at the tactical reports showing how quickly the shadow creatures had overwhelmed the colony defenses. Every conventional weapon had failed. Every standard tactic had been useless. The creatures seemed to exist partially outside normal space, which made them nearly impossible to fight with traditional methods. Sometimes crude methods work where advanced technology fails, he replied. Humans do not think like us. They do not follow our rules of engagement. When they fight, they use everything available, including things we would never consider weapons. Their lack of civilization might be exactly what we need. The command center continued receiving fragmentary transmissions from Kepler 442b. Each message was weaker than the last as more communication equipment was destroyed or abandoned. The colonists were running out of safe places to hide, and their messages became more desperate with each passing hour. One transmission came from a group trapped in the main processing facility. They described watching the shadow creatures hunt methodically through the complex, killing anyone they found. The beings seemed to learn from each encounter, adapting their tactics to overcome whatever defenses. The colonists tried to use. Another message reported that the creatures grew more solid after each kill, as if they were absorbing life energy from their victims. What had started as barely visible shadows were becoming more physical and dangerous. With every death, the situation was getting worse by the hour. Commander Velter waited for a response from Earth, knowing that human military communications were much faster than Federation bureaucracy. If Earth decided to help, they would respond quickly and act even faster. Human military forces were known for making rapid decisions and launching operations within hours instead of weeks. As he waited, Commander Velter wondered what kind of humans would answer such a desperate call. The message would reach every military installation on Earth, but only the most elite units would be capable of such a mission. He needed soldiers who could fight in complete darkness against enemies that defied physics itself. The communication panel chimed with an incoming transmission from Earth. The response had taken only 4 hours, which was incredibly fast for interstellar communication. Commander Velter activated the receiver and heard a calm human voice speaking in perfect galactic standard. Admiral Park Hen-woo of Terran Special Operations Command, responding to your emergency request. We have reviewed the situation and are assembling an appropriate response team. Launch window opens in 18 hours. Estimated arrival time at target system is 21 days. We will need complete facility schematics and all available data on the hostile entities. Commander Velter felt relief wash over him. The humans were not just responding, they were already making plans. 18 hours from emergency call to launch was impossibly fast by Federation standards. Most alien military forces would still be filling out authorization forms. The human admiral continued. Our team will consist of 6 specialists selected for this specific mission type. They carry experimental weapons and have experience with unconventional enemies. We cannot guarantee success, but we can guarantee that someone will fight for your colonists. The transmission ended, leaving Commander Velter to wonder what kind of soldiers Earth was sending to fight shadow creatures in the darkness of an alien world. Whatever they were, he hoped they would be dangerous enough to succeed where conventional forces had failed. The fate of 3,000 innocent lives now rested with 6 humans flying toward an impossible battle in the depths of space. Admiral Park Hyun-woo stood in the secure briefing room beneath Terran Command Headquarters, reading the alien transmission for the 3rd time. Shadow creatures that could walk through walls and killed without making sound. This was exactly the type of impossible mission that required very special people. He activated his personal communication device and began making calls to 6 locations around Earth. The first call went to Captain Kim Dae-ho, who was training new recruits at the mountain warfare facility in the Korean Alps. Kim had earned his reputation during the Titan Wars, when Zephyrian battleships surrounded the mining station where he was stationed. He held them off alone for 6 hours using nothing but mining charges and construction equipment. When rescue ships finally arrived, they found Kim sitting calmly in the wreckage surrounded by destroyed alien fighters. Kim listened to the mission briefing without asking questions. When Admiral Park finished speaking, Kim simply said, "I will be ready in 2 hours," and ended the call. That was typical of Kim Dae-ho. He never wasted words on things that did not matter. The second call reached Lieutenant Colonel Lee Mi-rae at her apartment in Seoul, where she was reading technical manuals about alien ship designs. Lee had earned the nickname Ghost after she infiltrated a crystalline hive ship during the Europa campaign. She moved through their heavily guarded vessel, killing their entire command crew without triggering a single alarm. The enemy never knew she was there until their ship stopped responding to orders. Lee accepted the mission, immediately asking only for detailed schematics of the mining facility. Her specialty was moving unseen through enemy territory and eliminating targets with precision. She had studied every type of alien architecture and security system in the known galaxy. Major Choi Won-bin received his call while working in the medical research lab at Busan Military Hospital. Choi was unusual because he combined advanced combat training with expert knowledge of alien biology. During the Battle of Europa Station, he spent 3 days treating wounded soldiers while fighting off alien boarding parties. He never left his medical post even when the station hull began breaking apart around him. Choi asked detailed questions about the shadow creatures, wanting to understand how they killed their victims and whether they left any physical evidence behind. His medical knowledge often provided insights that pure military thinking missed. He understood that knowing how an enemy killed was the first step toward stopping them. Sergeant First Class Yoon Hae-jin was testing new weapon prototypes at the Jeju Island Proving Grounds. When his call arrived, Yoon loved weapons the way other people loved art. He had personally tested every human military weapon developed in the past 20 years, often in situations where equipment failure meant death. His philosophy was simple: overwhelming firepower applied with surgical precision. Yoon immediately began calculating what weapons would be most effective against partially incorporeal enemies. He started making lists of experimental equipment that might disrupt whatever process allowed the creatures to phase through matter. His excitement was obvious even over the communication link. Captain Nam So Young received her call while rebuilding a damaged transport ship in the orbital shipyard above Earth. Nam was a genius with mechanical systems who could build working equipment from scrap materials. In one famous incident, she rebuilt a starship engine while under enemy fire, then used the same ship to ram through 3 alien vessels. Nam asked about the mining facility, power systems, and available materials. She was already planning how to modify existing equipment to create new weapons. Her ability to jury-rig solutions from whatever was available had saved countless lives in impossible situations. The final call went to Staff Sergeant Kang Min-ho at the Intelligence Analysis Center in Incheon. Kang spoke 17 different alien languages and had an almost supernatural ability to understand enemy movement patterns. He could predict what alien forces would do before their own commanders made decisions. Kang wanted to know everything about Vorthan psychology and the planet mining operations. He understood that successful missions required knowing not just the enemy but also the people you were trying to save. His questions showed he was already analyzing the tactical situation within 4 hours. All 6 team members had arrived at Luna Base, the secret military facility hidden on the far side of Earth Moon. They gathered in the main briefing room, where Admiral Park had assembled everything known about Kepler 442b and the shadow creatures. The planet's surface was mostly barren rock with thin atmosphere that required environmental suits. The real activity happened underground in a vast network of mining tunnels that extended for kilometers in every direction. The quantum crystals being mined there emitted strange energy that interfered with most scanning equipment. Captain Kim studied the facility blueprints, noting every entrance, exit, and choke point. The mining complex was like an underground city with living areas, work zones, and storage facilities, all connected by a maze of tunnels. The layout would make it easy for creatures to ambush defenders, but also created opportunities for small teams to move unseen. Lieutenant Colonel Lee focused on the reports about creature behavior. They seemed to hunt in coordinated groups and learn from each encounter with their prey, the fact that they grew more solid after killing suggested they were becoming more dangerous over time. This was not just a rescue mission, but a race against time. Major Choi examined the medical reports from surviving colonists. The creatures left no physical wounds, but their victims simply stopped living as if their life force had been drained away. This suggested the beings were feeding on something beyond mere physical matter, possibly the bioelectric energy that powered living brains. Sergeant Yoon began planning their equipment. Loadout standard energy weapons were useless, but the quantum crystal's interference might work both ways. If the crystals disrupted scanning equipment, they might also disrupt the creatures' ability to phase between dimensions. Captain Nam studied the mining equipment specifications. The facility had powerful industrial tools that could be converted into weapons. Plasma cutters or processors and resonance scanners all had potential military applications in the right-hand staff. Sergeant Kang analyzed the timeline of the attacks. The creatures had appeared suddenly 3 weeks ago, emerging from the deepest mining shafts. The pattern of attacks suggested they were testing human defenses and learning how to overcome them. Each assault was more effective than the last. Admiral Park watched his teamwork, knowing he had chosen correctly. These 6 people had faced impossible situations before and found ways to win. They did not panic when confronted with unknown enemies. Instead, they adapted and overcame. The team spent 12 hours planning their mission. Using every piece of available information, they studied Vorthan psychology to understand how the colonists would react to human rescuers. They memorized the facility layout until they could navigate it in complete darkness. They analyzed the creature reports, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. Their ship was the Shadowhawk, a Terran stealth frigate designed for covert operations in hostile territory. The vessel carried experimental weapons and equipment that had never been tested in actual combat. This mission would determine whether human military technology could match human determination. As they prepared for departure, each team member made their final preparations. Kim checked his tactical gear, ensuring every piece of equipment was positioned for quick access. Lee tested her stealth systems and silent weapons. Choi packed medical supplies and biological analysis equipment. Yoon loaded experimental weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Nam gathered tools and spare parts for field modifications. Kang downloaded every piece of intelligence data available about the target system. The Shadowhawk launched from Luna Base exactly 18 hours after the original distress call, just as Admiral Park had promised. The ship accelerated toward the edge of the solar system, where it would enter hyperspace for the 3-week journey to Kepler 442. Bus Earth fell behind them. The 6 team members knew they were flying toward a battle unlike any in human history. They would face enemies that defied the laws of physics, creatures that grew stronger with each kill, and a rescue mission complicated by unknown alien psychology. But they also knew something that no alien species truly understood about humans when faced with impossible odds. Humans did not calculate probabilities or debate tactical doctrine. They simply found a way to win regardless of what logic said was possible. Shadow creatures of Kepler 442b were about to discover why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species. It was not because they were stronger or smarter than other races. It was because they refused to accept that any fight was truly impossible to win. The Shadowhawk cut through hyperspace like a knife through silk, carrying its 6 deadly passengers toward the edge of known space. Captain Kim stood on the bridge, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace flow past the reinforced viewports. 3 weeks of travel time gave the team plenty of opportunity to study their enemy and plan their attack. The ship artificial intelligence had compiled every available report about the shadow creatures, creating a database that the team studied obsessively. The beings appeared as shifting darkness with razor-sharp appendages that could slice through standard armor like soft bread. Most disturbing was their apparent intelligence. They hunted in coordinated packs and seemed to learn from every encounter. With their prey, Lieutenant Colonel Lee spent hours in the ship combat simulator, creating virtual versions of the mining facility. She practiced moving through the underground tunnels using only emergency lighting and memorized every corridor junction. and maintenance shaft. Her training focused on fighting enemies that could appear anywhere without warning. Major Choi analyzed the biological reports, trying to understand how the creatures killed without leaving physical wounds. His medical background suggested they were draining some form of life energy, but the process remained mysterious. The fact that they grew more solid after each kill implied they were converting life force into physical matter. Sergeant Yoon worked in the ship weapons lab, modifying their equipment for fighting partially incorporeal enemies. He stripped down plasma cutters and rebuilt them with resonance generators that might disrupt the creature's dimensional stability. His experimental weapons had never been tested, but the mission offered no time for proper field trials. Captain Nam studied the mining facility technical specifications, looking for ways to convert industrial equipment into weapons. The quantum crystal processing plants generated enormous amounts of energy that could be redirected toward combat applications. She began designing modifications that could be built using only materials available at the mining site. Staff Sergeant Kang monitored subspace communications, searching for any additional transmissions from the colony. The signals grew weaker each day as more communication equipment was destroyed or abandoned. The few messages that got through painted an increasingly desperate picture. 2 weeks into their journey, the team received a fragmentary transmission that chilled them to the bone. A terrified Vorthan voice described watching the creatures absorb the life force of their victims, becoming more solid and dangerous with each death. The mining facility had become a feeding ground that allowed these interdimensional parasites to establish permanent presence in normal space. Captain Kim gathered his team in the main briefing room to discuss this new information. The creatures were not just killing randomly, they were systematically harvesting life energy to stabilize their existence in this dimension. Each death made them stronger and more capable of affecting the physical world. The implications were terrifying. If the process continued, the creatures would eventually become fully material beings capable of spreading beyond the mining facility. They could infest ships, travel to other worlds, and begin the same feeding process across the galaxy. The rescue mission had become something much more important. As they approached the Kepler system, the Shadowhawk sensors detected disturbing readings. The usual subspace chatter that filled most inhabited star systems was completely absent. No commercial traffic, no military patrols, no communication relays responding to standard queries. It was as if the entire system had been quarantined or abandoned by every spacefaring species. The mining colony facilities appeared on their sensors, showing massive structural damage to the main habitat domes. Entire sections were exposed to the planet-thin atmosphere, and emergency beacons flashed sporadically across the surface. Many distress signals had gone dark since the original call for help was transmitted. Lieutenant Colonel Lee studied the tactical situation and developed their insertion plan. They would drop directly into the main mining complex using stealth pods, hoping to reach the largest group of survivors before the creatures detected their presence. The plan required perfect timing and coordination, since any mistake would alert every creature in the facility. The team carried experimental weapons designed specifically for this mission. Plasma cutters modified for combat use sonic disruptors that might affect beings existing partially outside normal space, and resonance generators that could force the creatures into material form. Each piece of equipment was untested but represented their best hope against impossible enemies. As they prepared for atmospheric entry, Sergeant Kang received another transmission from inside the colony. A weak voice, speaking broken galactic standard, described how the creatures had learned to coordinate their attacks. Using some form of telepathic communication, they could share information instantly across the entire facility, making traditional military tactics useless. The voice also reported that the creatures seemed to be building something in the deepest mining shafts using materials that defied identification, structures that existed partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. The purpose was unknown, but the construction was accelerating as more colonists died and fed the creatures. Energy. Captain Kim made final equipment checks, ensuring every team member understood their role in the insertion plan. Each person carried enough firepower to level a city block, but they all knew that brute force alone would not win this fight. They were about to face enemies that existed beyond normal rules of Reality, the Shadow Hawk, entered the planet atmosphere during the local night cycle when the thin air would provide maximum concealment for their approach. The stealth pods were designed for covert insertion behind enemy lines but had never been tested against enemies that could detect life force directly. As the ship descended toward the mining complex, sensors detected scattered life signs throughout the facility. Most were concentrated in heavily fortified areas where survivors had barricaded themselves behind whatever defenses they could improvise. The signals were weak, suggesting the colonists were running low on power and supplies. The facility emergency lighting cast strange shadows through damaged corridors, creating a maze of light and darkness that would confuse normal vision. The air recycling systems still functioned, but strange sounds echoed through the complex noises that belonged to no civilized space. Major Choi monitored the atmospheric readings, confirming that the air was safe to breathe, but contained trace elements that did not appear on any periodic table. The creatures were apparently changing the environment itself, making the facility more suitable for their interdimensional existence. Captain Nam activated her equipment scanners, analyzing the facility power systems and available materials. The quantum crystal processors were still operational, providing enormous amounts of energy that could be harnessed for their modified weapons. Her plans for converting mining equipment into combat tools looked increasingly feasible. Staff Sergeant Kang established communication protocols using encrypted channels that hopefully the creatures could not intercept. The team would maintain constant contact during the mission, sharing information and coordinating their movements through the facility complex layout. The stealth pods launched from the Shadowhawk, carrying the 6 team members toward their destiny in the darkness below. Each pod was equipped with sensors and weapons, but ultimately the mission's success depended on human adaptability and determination against enemies that defied understanding. As they descended through the thin atmosphere, Captain Kim felt the familiar calm that came before impossible battles. His team was as prepared as any group could be for fighting creatures that existed partially outside reality. They carried the best equipment human technology could provide and had trained for every possible scenario, but he also knew that no amount of preparation could fully ready them for what waited in the mining facility below. The shadow creatures had already proven immune to conventional weapons and tactics. The next few hours would determine whether human creativity and refusal to accept defeat could succeed where advanced alien technology had failed. The stealth pods touched down in the facility central hub during the darkest part of the local night. Emergency lighting flickered through damaged corridors while strange sounds echoed from the deeper tunnels. The hunt was about to begin, and for the first time in weeks, the creatures would face prey that could fight back. Each team member activated their equipment and began moving toward their assigned objectives, knowing that the fate of 3,000 innocent lives depended on their success in the darkness ahead. The shadow creatures were about to learn why humans were considered the galaxy's most dangerous species. The stealth pods landed in the mining complex central hub with barely a whisper of sound. Captain Kim immediately activated night vision gear and surveyed their landing zone. The facility emergency lighting created pools of dim illumination connected by corridors of absolute darkness, perfect hunting ground for creatures that moved like living shadows using hand signals. Kim divided his team into 3 pairs, each taking different routes toward the strongest life sign concentrations. Kim and Lieutenant Colonel Lee headed toward the residential sector where 43 Vorthan colonists had managed to survive by barricading themselves inside a reinforced cafeteria. Major Choi and Sergeant Yoon moved toward the mining operations center where sensor readings suggested several dozen survivors were trapped in the main control room. Their route took them through the facility industrial sector where massive ore processing machines sat silent and dark. Captain Nam and Staff Sergeant Kang took the most dangerous path, descending into the lower mining tunnels where the creatures first appeared. Their mission was to locate the source of the infestation and determine whether it could be sealed or destroyed before more creatures emerged. Each pair maintained constant communication through encrypted tactical networks that hopefully the creatures could not detect. The facility layout was more complex than the blueprints had shown, with maintenance shafts, emergency passages, and service tunnels creating a 3-dimensional maze. Kim and Lee reached the residential sector after 20 Minutes of careful movement through darkened corridors, they found the barricaded cafeteria where the Vorthan survivors huddled in terror behind tables and chairs stacked against the reinforced doors. The aliens were barely rational, speaking in rapid whispers about shadows that drank souls through broken translation software. The humans learned that the creatures had appeared suddenly 3 weeks ago, emerging from the deepest mining shafts like smoke given deadly form. They seemed to hunt according to patterns the survivors could not understand, sometimes ignoring easy targets while pursuing others with relentless determination. The Vorthan described watching the creatures phase through solid walls to reach victims who thought they were safely hidden. Energy weapons passed harmlessly through the beings, while their razor-sharp appendages cut through armor and flesh with equal ease. The only defense was staying perfectly still and hoping the creatures would move on to easier prey. Meanwhile, Choi and Yoon made a discovery that changed their understanding of the entire situation. The mining operations center contained detailed geological surveys showing that quantum crystal deposits extended much deeper than anyone had realized. The deepest shafts penetrated what the surveys classified as anomalous space regions where normal physics broke down. The creatures were not invaders from another world, they were manifestations of something that existed in the spaces between dimensions. The mining operation had accidentally breached a barrier that kept these entities contained, and now they were pouring into normal reality like water through a broken dam. Yoon examined the facility defense systems, finding that every conventional weapon had been tried and failed. Energy rifles, plasma cannons, and even nuclear charges had no effect on beings that existed partially outside normal space. The creatures could selectively materialize only the parts of themselves needed for killing while keeping the rest of their forms safely in dimensional limbo. In the deepest tunnels, Nam and Kong discovered something even more disturbing. The creatures were not killing randomly, they were systematically harvesting life force to stabilize their existence in this dimension. Each death provided energy that allowed them to become more solid, more real, and more dangerous. Mining facility had become a feeding ground designed to give these interdimensional parasites permanent foothold in normal space. The strange structures being built in the deepest shafts were anchor points that would allow unlimited numbers of creatures to cross into their reality. Kang monitored the creatures' telepathic communications, discovering they used the same dimensional frequencies as their phasing ability. The beings shared information instantly across the entire facility, coordinating their hunts with perfect efficiency. They knew exactly where every survivor was hiding and were systematically eliminating them. The team regrouped at a defensible position in the facility main engineering section, bringing 43 rescued Vorthan colonists with them. The aliens were traumatized beyond normal limits, but their survival instincts remained strong. They provided detailed information about creature behavior and attack patterns. Captain Kim realized they faced tactical challenges unlike anything in human military history. How do you fight enemies that exist partially outside reality, grow stronger with each victory, and can phase through solid matter at will? Conventional weapons were useless, and traditional defensive positions offered no protection. The first major test came when motion sensors detected 12 creatures approaching their position. The beings moved through the facility like flowing darkness, coordinating their approach through telepathic links. Kim ordered his team to activate their experimental resonance weapons, hoping the untested technology would work as designed. Lieutenant Colonel Lee positioned herself in the main corridor leading to their defensive position. Her modified plasma cutter hummed with strange harmonics as it generated resonance fields designed to disrupt dimensional stability. The weapon had never been tested against real targets, but theoretical calculations suggested it might work. Sergeant Yoon set up overlapping fields of fire using conventional weapons loaded with ammunition designed for maximum kinetic impact. If the resonance weapons could force the creatures into material form, standard bullets and explosives might finally be effective. The creatures attacked without warning, flowing through walls and ceiling. Like liquid shadow, their forms rippled between visible and invisible as they tried to maintain dimensional stability while moving through normal space. The resonance weapons created visible distortions In the air around them, for the first time since the creatures appeared, they were forced into fully material form. Lee opened fire with surgical precision, dropping 3 creatures before they could adapt to the new threat. Yoon heavy weapons turned 2 more into scattered biological matter that dissolved into interdimensional mist. The surviving creatures retreated, but not before the humans learned of valuable information. The beings could be hurt when forced into material form, but they adapted quickly to new threats. Each encounter would be more difficult as the creatures learned to counter human tactics. Major Choi examined the remains of destroyed creatures, finding biological matter that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The beings were not truly alive in any sense humans understood, but rather organized patterns of interdimensional energy that mimicked living creatures. Captain Nam began modifying mining equipment to create area denial weapons using quantum crystal fragments to generate sustained resonance fields. These devices would prevent creatures from using their phasing abilities within specific zones, giving the humans controlled battlefield where conventional tactics might work. The rescued Vorthan colonists watched in amazement as humans systematically analyzed their impossible enemies and developed countermeasures. These beings had terrorized advanced alien civilization for weeks, but humans treated them as just another tactical problem to be solved. Staff Sergeant Kang intercepted creature communications, discovering they were calling for reinforcements from whatever dimension they originated. The breach between realities was widening, allowing more powerful beings to cross into normal space. The window for stopping the infestation was closing rapidly. Kim realized they were fighting a war of evolution, with both sides adapting to counter their opponent's advantages. The creatures learned from each encounter, becoming more resistant to human weapons, but humans learned faster and adapted more creatively, turning every disadvantage into potential opportunity. The next wave of attacks would test whether human adaptability could match interdimensional intelligence. The creatures were no longer random monsters, they were organized enemies with tactical planning and strategic goals. The real battle for the mining facility was about to begin. As emergency lighting flickered through damaged corridors, the 6 humans prepared for escalating warfare against enemies that defied every rule of reality. Their experimental weapons had proven partially effective, but the creatures were already adapting their tactics. The fate of 3,000 colonists and potentially the entire galaxy now depended on whether 6 humans could outsmart beings that existed beyond normal understanding. The shadow creatures had never faced enemies that refused to accept the impossible. Captain Kim checked his equipment one final time, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether humanity's reputation for winning unwinnable battles was justified. The creatures were about to learn why humans were feared throughout the galaxy, not for their strength, but for their absolute refusal to surrender. Captain Kim watched the tactical displays showing creature movement patterns throughout the mining facility. The beings were no longer hunting randomly, they were conducting organized military operations designed to eliminate human resistance. Their intelligence was growing along with their physical stability. The first lesson learned was that conventional tactics meant nothing against enemies that could ignore walls and appear anywhere without warning. Lieutenant Colonel Lee adapted by treating every space as potentially hostile. Her movements became fluid and unpredictable, never staying in one position long enough for creatures to coordinate attacks. Major Choi made breakthrough discovery while examining biological samples from destroyed creatures. The beings existed in multiple dimensional layers simultaneously, but their consciousness was anchored in normal space. This meant psychological warfare might be effective even if physical attacks were limited. Sergeant Yoon responded to creature adaptation by creating increasingly sophisticated weapons. His modified mining equipment now generated complex resonance patterns that could force materialization, disrupt telepathic communication, or create dimensional barriers. The creatures had never faced enemies that innovated faster than they could adapt. Captain Nam converted the entire mining facility into weapon system. Using quantum crystal processors, she created resonance fields throughout the complex that could be activated instantly. Her network of improvised weapons turned every corridor into potential kill zone, controlled from the central engineering station staff. Sergeant Kang discovered that creature telepathic communications followed predictable patterns. He learned to predict their movements by analyzing their information-sharing networks. This intelligence advantage allowed the humans to set ambush and avoid being surrounded by superior numbers. The second major engagement occurred when 24 creatures attempted coordinated assault on the human position. The beings had learned to partially materialize only specific body parts, allowing them to attack, while remaining mostly invulnerable to human weapons. Lee countered this tactic by using mobile resonance generators that created unpredictable disruption fields. The creatures could not maintain partial materialization when the dimensional stability kept shifting randomly. This forced them to choose between being fully vulnerable or completely unable to attack you, and unleashed overlapping fields of fire that turned the main corridor into killing ground. His weapons created cascading resonance effects that trapped creatures in material form long enough for conventional ammunition to be effective. The alien colonists watched in amazement as humans turned hopeless defensive position into calculated slaughter. But the creatures learned from every encounter. The next attack wave consisted of 48 beings using new tactics. They attacked from multiple directions simultaneously while jamming human communication networks. Their coordination had evolved beyond simple telepathy into true hive-mind intelligence. Skim realized they were fighting war of evolution where adaptation speed determined survival. The humans responded by abandoning fixed positions and adopting fluid tactics that changed constantly. Each team member operated independently while maintaining loose coordination through encrypted channels. Choi developed psychological warfare techniques based on his analysis of creature consciousness. He discovered that the beings experienced something analogous to fear when their dimensional stability was threatened. Sustained resonance attacks could cause them to retreat even when they held tactical advantage. Nam created mobile weapon platforms, using mining vehicles equipped with resonance generators and conventional weapons. These improvised tanks could move through the facility while providing fire support and creating safe zones where survivors could be evacuated. The battle for the mining facility became three-dimensional chess game with moves occurring across multiple dimensional layers. The creatures held advantages in numbers, mobility, and regeneration, but humans held advantages in creativity, adaptability, and sheer stubborn determination. Kang intercepted communications revealing that creature reinforcements were arriving from their home dimension. The breach between realities was widening as more life energy was harvested, allowing increasingly powerful beings to cross into normal space. The third major engagement tested human adaptability against 72 creatures using advanced coordination and new attack methods. The beings had learned to create dimensional distortions that disrupted human electronics while maintaining their own telepathic networks. Lee responded by reverting to purely mechanical weapons and visual communication signals. Her team abandoned all electronic equipment and fought using modified mining tools and improvised explosives. The creatures had not expected humans to voluntarily reduce their technological advantages. Yun created mechanical resonance weapons that operated without electronic control. His hand-cranked devices generated the dimensional disruption fields needed to force creature materialization. These primitive but effective weapons could not be jammed or disrupted by creature countermeasures. The turning point came when Nam activated her facility-wide weapon network simultaneously. Every quantum crystal processor in the mining complex generated resonance pulses that created dimensional chaos throughout the underground tunnels. The creatures found themselves trapped in material form across the entire facility. Human teams moved through the complex, methodically eliminating materialized creatures with conventional weapons. The beings could not coordinate their defense when their telepathic networks were disrupted by constant dimensional interference. Their superior numbers became liability in confined spaces. Choi provided medical support while analyzing creature behavior under stress. He discovered that prolonged materialization was exhausting. For beings that normally existed in dimensional limbo, the longer they remained solid, the more vulnerable they became to permanent destruction. Surviving creatures retreated to the deepest mining shafts where the dimensional breach provided them with more stable anchor points, but their withdrawal allowed humans to secure most of the facility and begin evacuating colonist survivors. Kim established defensive positions Controlling all access routes to the deep tunnels, his team had learned to fight interdimensional enemies and emerged victorious, but the real challenge still waited below. The source of the infestation remained active and more creatures continued arriving from their home dimension. The rescued Vorthan colonists could barely comprehend what they had witnessed. Humans had faced impossible enemies and systematically dismantled their advantages through pure tactical innovation. The aliens began referring to the human team as Deathbringers, a title that Kim Squad wore with grim satisfaction. Kang analysis of intercepted communications revealed disturbing information. The creatures in the deep tunnels were building something that would allow massive invasion of normal reality. The structure they were constructing would create permanent gateway between dimensions, allowing unlimited numbers of beings to cross over. The facility was secured, but the mission was far from complete. The humans had won every battle through superior adaptability and creative tactics. But the war would be decided in the deepest tunnels, where reality itself became unstable. As his team prepared for the final assault, Captain Kim reflected on the battle they had fought. Humans had faced enemies that defied physics, logic, and sanity. They had adapted faster than beings with millions of years of evolutionary advantage. They had turned certain defeat into tactical victory through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept the impossible. The creatures had learned that humans were dangerous, not because of superior technology or overwhelming force, but because they never stopped adapting, never stopped innovating, and never accepted that any fight was truly unwinnable. The shadow creatures were about to face the ultimate test of human determination in the deepest tunnels where dimensions merged and reality broke down. 6 humans would either save the galaxy or die trying. There would be no middle ground and no second chances. The final battle waited in darkness below, where creatures that existed beyond normal understanding would discover why humans were feared throughout the galaxy, not for their strength but for their absolute refusal to surrender when innocent lives were at stake. The deep mining tunnels stretched into darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. Captain Kim led his team down passages carved through rock that defied normal geology. The walls showed crystalline formations that existed in multiple dimensions, simultaneously creating optical illusions that hurt human eyes to observe directly. Staff Sergeant Kong sensors detected massive energy readings ahead where the dimensional breach had torn reality apart. The creatures had been building something in the deepest chambers using materials that did not belong in normal space. Their construction was nearly complete and would soon allow unlimited invasion from their home dimension. Lieutenant Colonel Lee scouted ahead using stealth equipment designed for human warfare but adapted for interdimensional enemies. Her modified gear let her observe creature activity without triggering their telepathic detection networks. What she found made her blood run cold. The beings had constructed gateway device using hybrid technology that combined quantum crystals with interdimensional matter. The structure existed simultaneously in normal space and their home dimension, creating permanent bridge between realities. Thousands of creatures waited on the other side, ready to pour through when the gateway achieved full stability. Major Choi analyzed biological samples from the deeper tunnels, discovering that reality itself was becoming contaminated. The dimensional breach was spreading like infection, converting normal matter into something that could exist in multiple realities. The process would eventually consume the entire planet. Sergeant Yoon calculated the firepower needed to destroy the gateway structure. His analysis showed that conventional explosives would be useless against something that existed partially outside normal space. The only solution was using the facility's entire quantum crystal stockpile to create resonance cascade that would collapse the dimensional barrier. Captain Nam studied the engineering requirements for Yoon plan. The resonance cascade would require manual detonation from within the breach itself because automated systems could not function in the unstable dimensional environment. Someone would have to sacrifice themselves to trigger the explosion. The team gathered in final strategy session, knowing they faced decision that would determine the fate of billions of lives across the galaxy. The gateway was hours away from full activation, and once opened it could never be closed by conventional means. Kim looked at his 5 teammates, each one ready to volunteer for the suicide mission. They had fought impossible battles and won through superior tactics and determination, but this final challenge required ultimate sacrifice from someone who understood the technical requirements. The debate was settled when Lee quietly slipped away while the others planned the resonance cascade. She moved through service tunnels toward the deepest chambers. Carrying enough modified explosives to level city blocks, her plan was more ambitious than the original proposal. Instead of just destroying the gateway, Lee intended to collapse the entire underground network, creating a tomb that would contain any remaining creatures. The explosion would be triggered from multiple points, simultaneously ensuring that nothing could escape the dimensional collapse. Kim discovered her true intentions when he found the additional charges she had planted throughout the tunnel system. He raced toward the deepest chambers, trying to reach her before she activated the cascade, but the creatures sensed human movement and launched final, desperate assault to stop them. Every creature in the facility converged on the human position, creating swirling maelstrom of shadow and death that tested human endurance beyond normal limits. The beings threw everything they had at the 6 humans, knowing that failure meant permanent separation from their home dimension. Choi and Yoon established overlapping fields of fire, while Nam activated facility-wide resonance barriers to channel the creatures into kill zones. The aliens were more desperate than before, fighting with suicidal intensity because their entire species' survival depended on keeping the gateway open. Kang coordinated the defense while monitoring the dimensional breach expansion. They had minutes before the gateway achieved stability and began allowing massive creature reinforcements. The resonance cascade had to be triggered immediately, regardless of who was still in the blast zone. In the deepest chamber, Lee made final preparations as waves of creatures surged toward her. The quantum crystals around her began singing with power that transcended normal physics. The harmonic resonance built toward critical threshold that would tear apart reality itself. Kim reached the chamber entrance just as Lee activated the cascade. The crystals erupted with energy that could be seen from orbit, piercing the planet atmosphere with column of pure light. The dimensional breach screamed like reality itself being torn apart. The explosion that followed rewrote local physics for several seconds. Matter, energy, and dimensional barriers collapsed into single point before expanding outward with force that shattered the underground complex. The creatures caught in the blast simply ceased to exist as their anchor to normal space was severed. On the surface, rescue ships detected energy signature unlike anything in recorded science. The quantum cascade had not only destroyed the gateway, but created dimensional dead zone where interdimensional beings could never again establish foothold. When the energy dissipated, rescue teams found 5 humans standing among traumatized alien survivors. Their mission was complete, but their team was forever changed. Lee's sacrifice had prevented interdimensional invasion that could have consumed entire star systems. The Vorthan colonists could barely comprehend what had happened. Humans had faced enemies that existed beyond normal understanding and emerged victorious through combination of tactical brilliance, technological innovation, and ultimate sacrifice. Captain Kim filed his final report, knowing that official Federation records would never capture the true scope of what had occurred. The mining colony had been saved, but more importantly, a threat to the entire galaxy had been eliminated permanently. The surviving team members returned to Earth as heroes, but they carried knowledge that universe contained horrors beyond imagination. They also carried certainty that when next impossible mission arose, humanity would answer the call, because that was what humans did when others could not. Admiral Park read the mission report with mixture of pride and sorrow. 5 humans had survived the impossible, but at cost of their 6th team member. Lee's sacrifice ensured that shadow creatures would never again threaten civilized space. News of the rescue spread throughout the galaxy in whispered conversations. Aliens spoke of humans who fought when others fled, who adapted faster than evolution allowed, and who sacrificed themselves to save strangers they had never met. The Federation Council officially classified the incident as localized quantum anomaly, successfully contained by Terran Special Operations personnel. But across the galaxy, word spread of humans who faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. Humanity reputation grew beyond mere military competence to something approaching legend. Other species began to understand that humans possessed qualities that transcended technology or tactical training when civilization faced extinction.